In the mid-1700s, a woman's first duty was to be a good mother. But as the Industrial Revolution arose, the invention of new technology created more jobs for women. Women were the majority of factory workers in the mid-1700s because employers thought that women could adapt easier to the machines. Even though the availability of jobs increased for women, there were very harsh conditions for the workers, and women were typically paid half as much as men. In addition to working in factories, a lot of women had double jobs. After working in factories for many long hours, women had to then go home and feed and clothe their families. In the mining industry, women had to carry heavy loads of coal through dangerous tunnels that were always at risk of collapsing, flooding, and even, in some cases, exploding. During the Industrial Revolution, women worked mostly in the textile industry because of their pre-knowledge of textiles. In the textiles industry, the wages for workers were so low that many workers were in major debt. In the 1830s, the wages and working conditions were so bad that mill workers in Lowell, Massachusetts went on a 10-year strike pleading for legislative reform in the textile industry. This strike was a success, and the workers signed a petition that raised taxes for women in the workplace. In 1847, the Factory Act made it so that women could only work 10 hours a day in textile factories, and in 1867, this law expanded to all factories. Luckily, in the late 1800s, there was much more technology being invented, creating more jobs for women everywhere. In the workplace, women were treated very, very poorly, facing discrimination, awful pay, and harsh working conditions. Women were paid only half to two-thirds of what men were paid to do the same job. The factories were not heated or air-conditioned and lacked sufficient light and ventilation. Women worked in these conditions for 12 to 13 hours per day, 6 days a week. Injury was a huge problem in the workplace. When women were injured on the job, they weren't provided with any compensation or health benefits and were usually just fired.
Treatment of women started to change between the 18th and 20th centuries. In the early 1700s, women were upset because the Enlightenment slogan of free and equal did not apply to them. Even though it was said that women had natural rights, their rights were limited to the areas of home and family. A woman's first and main duty was to be a good mother. Later, in the 1700s, when the Declaration of the Rights of Man was issued, women also became angry that this did not grant equal citizenship to them. So, the Declaration of the Rights of Women and the French Citizen was created, demanding these equal rights. This promoted the idea of women being eligible for all public office positions and jobs. During the Industrial Revolution, the textile industry was being advanced. Since this was the main workforce for women, they now had more jobs, which led to a higher income and a little more economic freedom. During this time period, women started to really work for their rights. Across Europe and the U.S., women campaigned for fairness in marriage, divorce, and property laws. However, women reformers faced many obstacles. In Europe and the U.S., women could not vote. They were barred from most schools and had little, if any, protection under the law. A woman's husband or father controlled all of her property, but by the late 1800s, married women in some countries had won the right to control their own property. The struggle for political rights was even more difficult. In the U.S., the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848 demanded that women be granted the right to vote. However, groups promoting women's suffrage faced intense opposition. Women won the vote by the early 1900s. In the U.S. and Europe, the suffrage succeeded only after World War I. So, over time, women were slowly treated better but still faced a lot of discrimination in the community and the workplace.